Hello and welcome to Warhammer 40,000 with Zebu Nation. This is a series where I talk about 40K, some topic surrounding the hobby or the lore or something like that. And today we're going to play a little Space Wolf in the background, and this actually folds into today's topic very nicely because Space Wolf is a game that's easy to play, it's easy to pick up. It's based on an iOS game, so it's got simple mechanics and things like that. And today's topic is, how do you start with 40K? I see this question asked all the time. How do you start either playing the game or reading the novels or getting into the lore or all that stuff? Where do you begin? So I'm going to break that down a little bit and, maybe help you get into Warhammer 40,000 if you've never played, or maybe you've played a little but you want to get more in depth. So first off, I'll tell you how I got started, and I got started with the novels, and I heard a snippet of an audio novel. It was for the Hell's Reach Armageddon novel, and I just sort of got really interested in what was going on there. It was a very dramatic reading. They do very good job with the audio books there. They have their own publishing label called the Black Library. So if you ever want to know where to go to find the novels, you can go to the Black Library, their website. They got them all. You can also, go to your typical bookstores. You can go to audible.com. They've got a bunch of the audio books if that's how you prefer it. So it's obviously easy to find and easy to buy the novels. But what people come to find out when they try to get into them is that there are many, many novels. There's close to, if not more than 100 novels. I'm not exactly sure. I don't know that anyone has ever counted. The number of novels is uncountable, but it's somewhere around 100. So, of course, when you have that many books, people want to know, where do you begin? So I began just jumping in. And if you want to do that, if you're that kind of person who doesn't mind just jumping in and figuring things out, then it's a perfectly good way to do it. I just jumped in on the Hell's Reach novel, found it after I heard that audio snippet, and started reading books from there. Now, I got a little bit lucky, because that novel is part of the Space Marine Battles series. And so that's a series that they just pick different famous battles from throughout history and just focus on that. And they bring to life the characters and the events and all that stuff. So they're sort of self-contained. So if you want to start there, if there's this favorite Space Marine chapter that you have, or that you think their armor looks cool, or you heard the story of one of their heroes or something like that, look at the Space Marine Battles series and find a chapter that interests you, of Space Marines, of course, and give it a shot. Now, the other thing about those Space Marine Battles books is they are within the timeline, so they're all canon, even though they're not particularly interrelated. But the other thing is, a lot of times they'll fight against a different faction. They'll fight against the Tau or the Tyranids or somebody like that. And so if you're interested in those other ones, then you can get some insight into those other factions also. That's how I started to get interest in the Tau, was I read one of the Space Marine Battles. I forget exactly what the name of the book was, but it was the Ultramarines versus the Tau. They invaded some Tau planet, and you got an insight into the heroes and the culture of the Tau, and that got me interested, because they're kind of a cool race, especially if you're looking at the grim dark of Warhammer 40,000 and wondering where are people who are less grim and less dark. You can look towards the Tau. They're sort of, they've got the greater good and all that stuff. But anyway, that's getting off topic a little bit. So the books, if you want to start in the middle, there are places to jump in. Like I mentioned, the Space Marine novels. There's also the Eisenhorn Inquisition novels. that's a really good place to start if you're coming from a background of maybe you read a lot of like detective stories or like not fantasy but urban fantasy, modern fantasy, where there are like wizards and stuff like that in modern day. The Eisenhorn series have a lot of that in them. They've got like a lot of Dresden Files kind of stuff in them, where it focuses on the Inquisition and, you know, this character named Eisenhorn, who's one of like the top inquisitors, but it takes place away from the battlefield, and it gives you a look inside the Imperium of Man and like how the rest of the society actually functions amidst all this war, right? The Space Marine battles are all about just, you know, big Space Marines and giant battles and huge enemies and stuff like that. But the Inquisition series is a little more personal, a little bit more relatable. You're dealing with, you know, for the most part, regular people who have special abilities, but they're not supermen and they're not monsters. So those are two places to start if you just want to jump in. But not everybody likes to jump in. Some people are completionists. And if you're a completionist, if you want to start at the beginning in terms of the novels, then you want to start in the 30K period. So, you know, modern times in terms of the story is 40K, or 41 actually. But if you want to go back to where the story kind of begins, you want to go back to the 30K. And if you go to Wikipedia, there's a list of all the novels on Wikipedia. And they have them separated between 30K and 40K, and that's kind of where you want to start. So the first novel series is called The Beast Arises, and if you want to start there, that's fine. Go ahead and start there. That's basically a several novel series. I think there's like 10 books in the series, actually, about a huge orc invasion that takes place right in the heart of the Imperium, and it's pretty good. From what I understand, I read the first book. It was pretty good. I got the gist of it and decided that was enough. I didn't need to read any more. And that's the other thing about this series. Because there are so many books, just read the ones that you feel like reading and then move on. Like, don't feel overwhelmed like you have to read every single thing, because you'll get the gist of it. You'll get the idea. But after that, if you want to read The Beast Arises, you can do that. But after that, the most important thing to read in the 30K is the Horus Heresy series. If you ask most people, that's where they'll tell you to start. They'll say, start with the Horus Heresy series. The problem with the Horus Heresy series is that currently, by the end of this year, there will be 53 novels in the Horus Heresy series, and I don't really see an end to these novels. I mean, there is a definite end to the story, but right now they're cranking them out. I mean, they cranked out, I think, 6 this year alone in the Horus Heresy series. And that kind of gets you an idea of how the Black Library produces these things, is they have a stable of writers who are all constantly writing simultaneously. And so they can crank out tons and tons of these novels. So if you're someone who's just a voracious reader, and you read like a book a week, Warhammer 40,000 is kind of your place, because you're going to get so many books. Every year, they publish, 10 to 12 novels a year, somewhere within the 40K line. I mean, not necessarily all within Horus Heresy, but still, if you're really a big reader, definitely look at Warhammer 40,000. But anyway, the Horus Heresy, like I said, 53 novels. You don't have to read them all. I didn't read them all. Start with the first 3. That's a pretty good place to start. Those are 3 pretty good novels. Again, they're all listed in Wikipedia. Horus Rising is the first novel in the series, and then False Gods and Galaxy in Flames. Those are pretty good. Flight of the Eisenstein, the 4th book, is also somewhat important. It lays some groundwork for some certain characters later on. After that, you can sort of pick and choose what you want. What I did is I picked out my favorite writers and just sort of read the novels that they wrote. So Dan Abnett is one of my favorite writers. He writes comic books, and I read a lot of his comic books. So I started reading his novels, and that was pretty good. And then Aaron Dembski Bowden, the writer of that Hell's Reach novel I mentioned, I started reading his. So those are the only ones in the Horus Heresy I've read, or at least listened to the audio books, sort of half and half. I read some, listened to some on the audiobooks. But anyway, it's a huge series. It's massive science fiction. Again, you have to be a science fiction fan for the most part if you're going to get into Warhammer 40,000. But still, that's where you go. And then there's, after the Horus Heresy series, there's a sort of a compendium, not a compendium, it's a sister series, I guess you would say, which is the Primarch series. And that tells you about all the Primarchs, who are very, very important characters to Warhammer 40,000 and very important to the Horus Heresy. So you can read that as well. And then after that, there are some other smaller series you can read. The Garrow series is pretty good. He's one of the guys that gets set up in those early novels, and he has a big influence of things to come later in basically all of 40K. And then after that, maybe you could move on to 40K, and you can start reading those novels pretty much in any way you want to. They jump around, they take place at different time periods, they talk about different parts of the galaxy and different factions, and there's dozens and dozens of these novels. So it's hard to tell you exactly where to go or what order to read them in. I mean, the simplest way to read them is in publication order. That could be a way to read them. I mean, if you're just trying to make some kind of sense of how do I read these novels, just read them in order of publication, and that's fine. Now, if you don't want to go through that trouble, if you don't want to read all of those novels and all of that stuff, and you just want to get up to date with what's going on right now, maybe you're a lapsed player, maybe you've been, you played a previous edition or read some previous books somewhere else, and you just want to get caught up on what's going on right now, you can definitely do that. And again, if you want to just look at publications dates, I would say start with anything written in 2017 or later. That's going to be based on the current rule set and the current galaxy and stuff that's going on right now. But if you want to be a little more specific about it, the first book I would read is called Black Legion, and that sets up a lot of what's going on in the current time frame. Now, the current time frame is known as the Dark Imperium, and this is really where the Dark Imperium starts, is in the Black Legion novel. That has to do with Abaddon the Despoiler and his Black Crusade that is starting to ravage across the Imperium and do a lot of damage to the galaxy. So that's really where the new stuff starts. And then from that, you can read the Dark Imperium novel, which is really the place where they explain sort of everything that's going on. It's less of a novel, and it's more of just like an information dump of everything that's going on, everything that's happening right now. And so that's a really important book to read. And then after that book, Cadia Stands is one of the new books. It just came out this year. That's another very important thing that happens in the 40K universe. Read that. Then Lords of Silence focuses on the Death Guard, and the Death Guard is really important for what's going on right now in the galaxy. They're going to be a big major player. Right now they're one of the few Chaos factions that have a full codex. They've got new models, all that kind of stuff. They're really being pushed right now as the main Chaos faction. They have their Primarch, Mortarion. He's back, and he's a model you can buy. He's a guy you can put in your army, and this will give you backstory on all of that stuff. And then, of course, there's a new novel coming out later this year called The Blood of Ajax. So you can just basically start with the 2018 novels from, once you've read Black Legion, Dark Imperium, Cadia Stands, and Lords of Silence. Once you've read those 4, you can just start reading the novels as they get published, and that's fine. That's fine. So that's the novels, and that's all the stuff like that. But what if you're just interested in the lore? You don't want to read novels, you just want to sort of get the information and understand what's going on. A good source that I found is actually a YouTube series by a guy named Luetin, Luetin. He has a YouTube channel that's mostly dedicated to 40K, and he did a very, very good series on the history of the 40K universe. All 40,000 years, he's got the history for it, or at least as much as can be known, because anything prior to 30K is sort of like rumors and just whatever people can piece together, because a lot of that history was lost. Much of it has been actually actively deleted and destroyed by the Inquisition and other factions. So that's kind of how they, the Black Library and Games Workshop, that's how they sort of get around some of the inconsistencies in the history and lore, as they just say that it's lies or it's lost knowledge, lost history, we don't know, we don't understand. But Luetin does a very good job of piecing it all together and giving you like a very compelling look at the history of the 40K universe. The other place to look, though, which is might be surprising to some people, but maybe not others, is to look at the actual 40K rulebook. If you go and buy the 8th edition rulebook, the thing is like it's 50% lore, 50% like cool artwork and cool pictures of models and painting and things like that. And it's what people who play the game call fluff. So the rulebook is 50% fluff and 50% rules. So I have friends who they'll buy like a role-playing game. Maybe they'll never play it, or maybe they even never expect to play it, but they like to pick it up just to read about a new universe, a new game system, just new lore. And so if you want to do that, if you want to buy the rule book and say, well, maybe I'll never play Warhammer 40,000, why would I pick up the rule book? You can pick it up because it has all this lore and all this fluff in it, and that's actually pretty cool. Now, if you want to get started in the game itself and start playing Warhammer, I wouldn't actually suggest doing what I did, which was go out and buy an army and then like look to play somebody. That's probably not a good way to do it. But luckily for you, in the last year or two, Games Workshop has started to publish these mini games. Number 1 on that list is Kill Team. This is where I would really suggest new players go to get into Warhammer 40,000. You can buy the Kill Team box set. It's around $100, so it's kind of a steep get to start with the hobby, but compared to other board games out there, it's actually not that expensive. And compared to the rest of Warhammer 40,000, it is really not expensive. It's actually a pretty good deal. So in that box set, you get all the rules that you'll need. You get everything you need. You even get 2 different factions, so you could play a game right away. Right away in Warhammer 40,000 terms, which is, maybe in a week or so after you bought the game. Because unlike other games, unlike other hobbies, which Warhammer 40,000, 40K, it is a hobby. Because what you have to do is you have to build the stuff, and you have to paint. Well, you don't have to paint the stuff, but you're encouraged to paint the stuff before you play with it. You definitely have to build it. You have to glue it together, you have to assemble it, all that stuff. So it takes you about a week, if you're working fast, or if you got 2 people working on it, maybe one person building one army and one person building the other army, and then both of you work together to build the terrain that comes with it, the board, essentially. But yeah, it's a good place to start because it's a small monetary investment. For $100, you can play the game, which is pretty good. Comes with all the rules, comes with everything, and you can start playing. And then what you can do, if you just want to play against your friend or, your sibling or whoever it is, your spouse even, that can be fun, that can be fine, but it's also something that you can take down to your local game shop. Now, my local game shop has like a lot of the rules just lying around. They've got a lot of the terrain just lying around. They've got places to play. So if you wanted to, all you really needed to do was bring a handful of models and your data sheets for your characters. And you can go down to your local store and you can play. You can find somebody, say, hey, you want to play Kill Team? Or maybe there's some people there already playing Kill Team. You could join a Kill Team league. Maybe you don't want to jump into a Kill Team tournament right away. But if you wanted to join a Kill Team league, if there is one in your local hobby shop, I think people would be more than happy to teach you the game. There's also a new game coming out for the orcs called Speed Freaks. It's more of like a car racing, car battling game. They've also got expansions for all of this stuff. They're really, really supporting these smaller games, especially Kill Team. That's why I mentioned Kill Team first and foremost. They've got all kinds of box sets for Kill Team. They've got a new expansion for Kill Team that just dropped called, I want to call it Necromunda, but Necromunda is actually a separate game in Warhammer 40,000. They haven't actually released an 8th edition Necromunda yet. I don't think, I got to check on that. That might not be true. Anyway, yeah, they've got expansions for it. They've got new games coming out. There's another new game coming out from, based in the Warhammer 40,000 universe. Oh, what is it called? The Dark Temple or something like that. Oh, I thought I had all my facts together, but now I'm starting to ramble and starting to go on. So anyway, there's some places to get started in the hobby, and there's all kinds of videos online that will show you how to build and play the game, especially if you go to the Warhammer YouTube channel. That's a good place to see tutorials. All of, just basically don't be intimidated by it. And I understand if you are, because I was like you not too long ago. I'm fairly new to getting back into the hobby. I played way back when. I don't even know what edition it was, but it was at some point in the 90s. I played a few games. I played the Space Hulk board game. That's how I got into Warhammer 40,000. That's why I think playing the smaller games is a good way to get in, because that's how I got in, was playing the Space Hulk mini game, essentially. But, oh, now I lost my train of thought. Anyway, don't be intimidated is what the train of thought was. Don't be intimidated because it seems like a hassle to build and paint and all these things, but it can become a hobby. And you can actually come to enjoy sort of the serenity of putting these models together and painting them and finding your own color schemes, and you start to get connected to these little plastic models, and you start making characters out of them and having it just fuels your own sort of creativity. So if you're someone who likes to be creative and you like to be handy and crafty, like you can build terrain and scenes and you can actually get really into it, and some people, they don't even play the game. They just paint the models and really focus on that and really perfect sort of the artistry side of the hobby. So if that kind of thing is interesting to you, this is definitely something to get into. So it's, yeah, I guess that's our topic for the day. We're just about finished with the Space Wolf mission here. We got maybe a minute or two left on the video. So I'm going to try to come out with, periodically, these Warhammer videos, going to talk about different things. I've been picking up several of the products, several of the new launches. So I'll probably talk about that. I'll probably show some Kill Team stuff, show some new box sets that I bought. I really like these box sets that they're coming out with. As someone who's new to the hobby, I think they're very cool. They're a way to get your hands on a bunch of models for not as much as you might think you'd have to pay for these models. I mean, it's still kind of expensive. This is kind of an expensive hobby. So you should find ways to cut costs whenever and wherever you can. And that's what I try to do with these box sets and other things. But yeah, I guess that's it. So, is there anything else I can add on? I gotta vamp for 30 seconds before this video ends, or I could just edit it and cut it off. I don't know. One or the other is what I will try to do. No, I'm just vamping now, you can tell. Anyway, Zebu Nation, signing off, whatever. We'll see you later. Bye-bye.